When IKEA opened in China, customers didn't shop. They slept. Literally. Families napped on display beds, ate lunch in the showrooms, and treated the store like a public park. At first, IKEA was stunned. But instead of pushing back, they adapted and turned chaos into one of their biggest success stories. This is how a Swedish brand learned to thrive by letting go of control. When IKEA arrived in China, it didn't open a furniture store. It accidentally opened what looked like a public living room. Families sprawled across sofas. Children jumped on display beds. Some people even brought snacks and took naps. At first glance, it looked like a cultural misunderstanding. But what happened next turned that chaos into one of IKEA's most successful international stories. How did a brand built on Swedish efficiency find its footing in one of the most chaotic retail environments in the world? And what can we learn from how they adapted? By the late 1990s, IKEA had become a global giant, known for its sleek, flat-packed furniture and maze-like showrooms. It had conquered Europe and North America by offering affordable design and a DIY ethos. China was the next frontier, massive, fast-growing, and increasingly urban. IKEA came in with high expectations, confident in its tested model, data-driven, process-oriented, and with a global playbook that had worked everywhere else. What they didn't realize was that China wouldn't just be another market, it would be a completely different world. IKEA opened its first store in Shanghai in 1998. The company expected a wave of customers drawn to its affordable, modern design. But the initial response was lukewarm. Sales were slow. Shoppers seemed curious but not convinced. Many were unfamiliar with the concept of assembling their own furniture. Others weren't ready to commit to purchases they couldn't easily return or get help with. The store felt alien to many, a Western import that didn't quite fit. And for IKEA, used to success, it was a wake-up call. China was not going to play by the same rules. Instead of shopping, customers started living in IKEA. They took naps in beds, lounged on sofas, and used the store's air-conditioned comfort as a break from the city's chaos. Families made full afternoons of it. People brought snacks, chatted for hours, and treated the space like a community center. For IKEA staff, it was bewildering. No one had trained them for this. At first, the behavior seemed disruptive, but then photos began to circulate online. Images of dozens of people sleeping in IKEA beds went viral, and what seemed like a crisis started to feel like an opportunity. Internally, IKEA was thrown off. "This isn't how people shop," was the common refrain among managers. In Europe, people came in, browsed, bought, and left. But in China, shoppers weren't leaving or buying. Former executives later described the confusion and cultural blind spots. IKEA had policies: don't sleep on the beds, don't treat displays like your living room, but enforcing them risked alienating customers. Slowly, a realization set in. This wasn't a failure to follow the rules, it was a failure to understand the context. What IKEA encountered was a deeper cultural divide. In the West, shopping is often fast and functional. Get in, get what you need, and leave. But in urban China, where dense cities offer few public gathering spaces and apartments are small, people crave comfort and openness. IKEA's air-conditioned showrooms offered something rare: space to breathe. Where Western shoppers valued speed and independence, Chinese customers valued togetherness and relaxation. IKEA had unintentionally tapped into a real social need. To understand what was happening inside IKEA's Chinese stores, you had to look outside them, into the streets, parks, and housing blocks of modern China. Communal living has deep roots in Chinese society, from multi-generational homes to shared outdoor spaces. Malls often double as social hubs, especially on weekends. Long family outings are common, and spending time together in clean, comfortable environments is a priority. What looked like unusual behavior was, in fact, completely ordinary in a different context. IKEA just hadn't seen it coming. Eventually, IKEA stopped seeing the crowds as a nuisance and started seeing them as data. The company launched internal studies to observe how customers interacted with the space. They asked new questions. What if this behavior wasn't just tolerated but embraced? Could the company redesign the shopping experience to fit these needs? This wasn't a quirk, it was a clue. IKEA's leadership began to realize that adapting to China didn't mean changing their identity. It meant expanding it. IKEA commissioned ethnographic research across Chinese cities, embedding with families, observing how they lived, and interviewing customers directly. What emerged was a powerful insight. Chinese shoppers didn't see IKEA just as a place to buy furniture. They saw it as a place to experience life. The value wasn't just in the products, it was in the environment. Families wanted inspiration, comfort, and time together. Furniture was almost secondary. For IKEA, this was a breakthrough moment. If they wanted to grow in China, they needed to sell more than shelves. They needed to sell belonging. With fresh research in hand, IKEA began redesigning its Chinese stores. They created layouts that reflected real Chinese apartments, smaller floor plans, more enclosed kitchens, and spaces that showcased how multiple generations could live together. They added localized touches, rice cookers, chopstick holders, and family-style dining setups. Rooms were made to feel warmer, more familiar. IKEA even adjusted lighting and signage to better suit Chinese preferences. The result? Stores felt less like showrooms and more like home, and customers responded. Once IKEA accepted that people were coming to their stores for more than just shopping, they made a bold move. They leaned in. Rather than trying to stop customers from lounging, they started creating more opportunities to do so. Cafeterias were expanded to accommodate longer meals and bigger groups. Staff were retrained to focus not just on product assistance, but on hospitality. The entire store layout was optimized for foot traffic that lingered. Suddenly, a visit to IKEA became a viable weekend plan. It wasn't just about sofas or tables, it was about being part of a shared public ritual. IKEA, without really planning to, became a kind of urban oasis, and customers kept coming back. One of IKEA's biggest breakthroughs in China came not from marketing, but from product design. Their iconic, hard-to-pronounce product names stayed the same, but inside the stores, everything began to shift. Chinese customers preferred firmer mattresses, round dining tables for big family meals, and kitchen setups that supported wok cooking and rice cookers. IKEA adapted quickly. They introduced new items, retired unpopular ones, and adjusted sizing for smaller urban apartments. They also made key changes in pricing, using locally sourced materials and production to make items more affordable. This wasn't just localization. It was IKEA China becoming its own version of the brand. For years, IKEA relied on its do-it-yourself model to keep prices low and customers engaged. But in China, DIY was a hard sell. Many Chinese shoppers viewed self-assembly as inconvenient or beneath the quality of a premium brand. IKEA realized it was hitting a cultural wall, so they shifted. Instead of pushing the global model, they partnered with third-party assemblers and delivery services. New in-store signage and app features let customers choose full-service logistics. It was a major break from tradition, but it worked. Sales went up, complaints went down, and customers saw IKEA as more user-friendly, not just Western. IKEA's early Chinese ads mirrored its European campaigns: sparse, clean, aspirational. But they didn't land. Families didn't relate to minimalist solitude, so IKEA shifted. They began showcasing real Chinese homes, real customers, and warm family moments. Campaigns highlighted togetherness, tradition, and emotion, all tied to how IKEA could make home life better. Social media became key. IKEA China leaned into memes, viral challenges, and user-generated content. One video featured a grandmother napping in a showroom bed, and it took off. IKEA wasn't just selling furniture anymore. They were building cultural relevance. What started as a retail oddity, people sleeping in stores, evolved into a symbol of brand trust. Photos of customers napping or eating noodles in IKEA showrooms became iconic. Instead of cracking down, IKEA embraced the humor and leaned into it. They allowed it to become part of their brand identity. In a crowded, fast-changing retail market, that kind of authentic emotional connection is priceless. Loyalty programs were revamped. Community events, in-store festivals, and even dating nights followed. IKEA in China became more than a place to shop. It became a place to belong, and that belonging translated into repeat business. As IKEA's popularity soared, local competitors began taking notes. Chinese furniture brands started mimicking IKEA's layouts, in-store experiences, and product pricing. Some even recreated the cafeteria model. For IKEA, the pressure was on. How do you stand out when others are copying your playbook? The answer: go deeper. IKEA doubled down on quality control, supply chain transparency, and customer service. They invested in experience design, training employees not just to sell, but to host. While others tried to replicate the surface, IKEA focused on the substance, and that kept them a step ahead. To support this massive operation, IKEA knew it had to localize not just the showroom, but the back end. They invested heavily in Chinese infrastructure, building local factories and sourcing materials within the country. In 2013, they opened their largest distribution center in Asia, right outside Shanghai. This allowed them to cut down on logistics costs, speed up delivery, and maintain pricing control, even as the economy fluctuated. During global disruptions, this local supply chain proved critical. While other brands faced stockouts and delays, IKEA China kept shelves full. It wasn't glamorous, but it was game-changing. In the early 2000s, IKEA China was struggling to convert curious foot traffic into actual buyers. But by the mid-2010s, something shifted. Store layouts were redesigned to reflect real Chinese apartments. Prices were adjusted. Delivery services got faster. And crucially, IKEA embraced, rather than fought, the unique way Chinese consumers used the store. The payoff? Between 2015 and 2020, sales in China doubled. By 2021, China had become one of IKEA's top 5 global markets. Over 30 stores served millions annually, and new locations were planned in smaller cities. The brand had not just survived the culture shock, it had leveraged it. What once looked like chaos now resembled loyalty. What began as naps and noodles turned into purchases, brand affinity, and long-term growth. IKEA didn't win China by being the smartest voice in the room. It won by being the quietest. Company leaders began to speak openly about the need for humility. In one interview, a senior executive said, "We came to China thinking we had the answers, but we learned we had to ask better questions." The CEO echoed this, saying IKEA's future wasn't about designing for customers, but with them. That shift, from authority to empathy, marked a turning point. Store teams started inviting feedback, testing ideas with real shoppers, and integrating local insights into everything from product lines to kitchen layouts. It was less about imposing the Swedish way and more about discovering the Chinese way together. What happened in China didn't stay in China. The lessons IKEA learned there reshaped its playbook across Asia. In India, for example, the company didn't launch with big box stores right away. It began with online offerings and small format locations tailored to local needs. In Southeast Asia, it shifted focus toward community spaces and mobile-first shopping. Ethnographic research, once a side tool, became central to expansion planning. IKEA began embedding researchers in homes, watching how people really lived, ate, cleaned, and rested. The idea was no longer to sell what worked in Sweden. It was to understand what mattered to families in Mumbai, Manila, or Hanoi, and design from there. But even with success, the road hasn't stayed smooth. COVID-19 forced IKEA to confront new challenges in China, especially the gap between its historically in-store experience and a digital-first world. Online furniture competitors surged. Local Chinese brands offered faster delivery and lower prices, often via mobile platforms IKEA hadn't fully embraced. In response, IKEA accelerated its e-commerce offerings, invested in AI-powered room planners, and launched sustainability initiatives aimed at younger, urban consumers. The company began to focus not just on selling products, but on building an ecosystem, one that combined the comfort of offline discovery with the speed of online convenience. The transformation is ongoing, but the mindset is in place. Think back to that surreal image. People sprawled across IKEA beds, some snoring, others slurping noodles. What once seemed absurd now reads like a business case in Adaptation. IKEA didn't shame its visitors or ban their behavior. It leaned in. It saw the store not just as a sales floor, but as a shared social space, a public living room in a city of small apartments. That willingness to say, "Let's understand this," rather than, "Let's fix this," changed everything. By joining the culture instead of resisting it, IKEA earned trust. And in the process, it turned one of the world's most complex consumer markets into a pillar of its global business. So what happens when a company gives up control and chooses curiosity over judgment? In IKEA's China story, we see the power of cultural humility. Not the kind that appears in slogans or corporate statements, but the kind that listens with real intent. IKEA didn't just adapt its furniture, it adapted itself. And in doing so, it discovered not only new customers, but a new way of doing business. One where growth is a byproduct of empathy, not ego. In a world that's more connected and more diverse than ever, that might be the most valuable strategy of all. If you've ever seen a global brand do something totally unexpected, not to change the customer, but to change itself, we'd love to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because the next time a company feels lost in translation, maybe the real solution isn't a better marketing plan. Maybe it's just listening more carefully.